10%. That's all I asked for. 10 lousy percent after busting my ass for 15 years, and this guy starts laughing like I just told him the funniest joke he'd ever heard. Preston Hartwell's laughter filled his corner office, bouncing off those fancy glass walls. You want a 10% raise after what, 15 years? He couldn't even get the words out before another wave of chuckling hit him. There I was, standing like an idiot with my portfolio tucked under my arm, 78 pages of proof that I'd basically been running their logistics operation while he took all the credit. I'm Andrew Sullivan, by the way. 48 years old, and until that moment, the kind of guy who kept his mouth shut and figured hard work would eventually pay off. Stupid, right? I'd been at Crawford Industries since I was 33, thinking loyalty meant something. Boy, was I wrong about that. The Blackstone manufacturing deal I put together cut their delivery costs by 35%, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. That contract alone brought in $12 million last quarter. Preston just waved his hand like he was swatting a fly, still grinning. Everyone's replaceable, Andrew. Even you. He gave me that fake smile all these corporate types perfect in business school. If you think you're worth more, go try your luck somewhere else. Something inside me just snapped. Not anger exactly, more like a switch flipping off. All those years of thinking that if I just kept my head down and did good work, somebody would notice. What a joke. I get it, I said, collecting my papers. My hands were shaking a little, but I don't think he noticed. Listen, Preston's voice got that phony, concerned tone they teach at CEO school. You're good at what you do, but your back office stuff. The board doesn't even know your name. That's just business. Right then, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I walked back to my desk, past all those glass offices where managers who'd been there half as long as me got to play important. My workstation was stuck in the corner of the 4th floor, surrounded by empty cubicles. Our whole department had shrunk from 18 people down to just 4 over the years. Not because the work got easier, because my systems had automated most of it. My computer was showing another one of those monthly newsletters. This one was all about how Preston's brilliant supply chain innovations had saved Blackstone Manufacturing millions. My innovations. My 16-hour days for 8 months straight. My solution that completely transformed how they moved their products around. Next to my keyboard sat the coffee I'd abandoned 3 hours earlier when I finally worked up the nerve to ask for that raise. There was also this old photo of my dad. He put in 32 years at the steel plant before they shut it down. Always told me loyalty mattered. I believed him too. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out this little leather notebook I'd been keeping, full of ideas I'd worked on over the years. Personal projects I'd documented with dates and times and all that. Systems I'd mess around with on weekends. Stuff I'd build on my home computer just because I was curious. Crawford had ended up using a lot of these ideas, but they never officially bought them from me. I was just too eager to prove myself, you know? I flipped through the pages and stopped at some notes from 4 years back. A whole series of optimization protocols that became the backbone of everything we did. At the top, I'd written, personal project, logistics automation through predictive modeling. Started 8:15, home system. Here's the thing Preston never knew, and Crawford's lawyers were too lazy to figure out. I'd never actually signed over the rights to any of this stuff. My employment contract covered work I did during company time using their equipment. But these were personal projects, developed on my own time with my own computer. I had all the documentation to prove it. I grabbed my phone and scrolled to a number I'd saved months ago but never called. Lindsay Morrison, operations director over at Pinnacle Solutions, our biggest competitor. She'd been trying to poach me for years. Her last message, from about 8 months back, said something like, "The offer's still good whenever you're ready. We actually value people who know what they're doing." My finger just hung there over the call button. 15 years of being the loyal company man was screaming at me to put the phone down, be reasonable, don't burn bridges. Then I remembered Preston laughing at me like I was some kind of joke. I hit call. Lindsay speaking. "This is Andrew Sullivan from Crawford. I think it's time we had that conversation you mentioned." "Andrew!" I could hear the excitement in her voice. "I was starting to think you'd never call. You free for dinner tonight?" 6 hours later, I'm sitting across from Lindsay at this fancy steakhouse downtown, the kind of place where you need reservations weeks ahead. But she'd made one phone call and boom, we had a table. "I've been watching your work for years," she said, looking at me over her water glass. "Well, watching what Crawford suddenly became capable of, which seemed to happen whenever you disappeared from LinkedIn for a while. Those supply chain improvements for Blackstone were incredible. That hit me right in the gut. How'd you know that was me? She smiled. Because Preston doesn't know jack about the technical side of what those systems actually do, let alone how to build them. We tried to reverse engineer what you guys were doing and couldn't even get close. That's when I knew we needed whoever was behind it all. I took a sip of water, trying to wrap my head around this. What exactly are you offering? Department head position, almost 3 times what you're making now, stock options, your own team. She leaned forward. But here's the real kicker, recognition. Your name actually goes on your work. And if you happen to bring along any personal innovations you developed on your own time, something clicked in her eyes. She got it. She nodded slowly. We've got a proper process for acquiring intellectual property. Fair compensation. We don't just expect to own everything our people create in their spare time. I pulled out my leather notebook and set it on the table. I've got documentation proving these systems were personal projects. Crawford used them, but they never actually bought them from me. Lindsay's eyes went wide as she realized what I was saying. That's one hell of an oversight by their legal team. Preston doesn't think much of back office people, I said, throwing his own words back at him. Including the lawyers, apparently. 2 weeks later, I'm dropping my resignation letter on Preston's desk. He barely looked up from whatever he was doing on his computer. 2 weeks' notice. He scanned the letter real quick. Where you headed? I thought about lying, but figured the truth would hit harder. Pinnacle Solutions. That got his attention. His head snapped up like I'd slapped him. Our competitor? Man, that's bad timing. We're about to close the expanded Blackstone deal. Yeah, I know, I said. I'm the one who built the whole proposal. Preston's face went through about 5 different expressions before he settled on panic. Look, we should talk about keeping you here. Maybe that raise you wanted. Pinnacle's offering me almost 3 times what I make here, plus I get to run my own department. He laughed again, but this time it sounded hollow. They're way overpaying. You'll be sorry when they figure out you can't deliver what they think you can. I just smiled. Guess we'll find out. Those last 2 weeks were weird. Peaceful, almost. I finished up all my transition stuff, trained the new guy, some recent college grad who looked scared out of his mind when he saw what he was inheriting, and made copies of everything that proved my personal projects were mine. On my last day, I had to sit through an exit interview with Howard Walsh, Crawford's legal guy. Just routine stuff, he said, sliding a stack of papers across his desk. Standard non-compete, confidentiality agreements, confirmation you're not taking any company property. I read through everything carefully. I'm not signing the non-compete. Howard blinked like I'd grown a second head. It's standard procedure. Wasn't in my original contract 15 years ago, and I'm not agreeing to it now. I looked him straight in the eye. And about company property, I'm not taking anything that belongs to Crawford. But I am taking my personal intellectual property that you guys never bothered to actually acquire. What personal property? His forehead wrinkled up. I opened my notebook and showed him all my dated entries. These algorithms and systems were developed on my own time using my own equipment. Crawford implemented them but never went through any formal acquisition process. I've got all the documentation right here. Howard's expression changed as he flipped through my notebook. It clicked for him what he was looking at. These are the core systems we use for everything. Yep, I said. He just stared at me, then at the notebook. I need to make some calls. Sure thing, I said, closing the notebook and standing up. But my employment ends today, and my personal property comes with me. I walked out of Crawford's building for the last time at 5:23 on a Friday afternoon. By Monday morning, I was sitting in my new corner office at Pinnacle, explaining to my team of 6 system specialists how we were going to turn this industry upside down. 7 weeks later, my systems went live at Pinnacle. Delivery efficiency shot up 32%. Operating costs dropped 28%. Our sales team marched into Blackstone with numbers showing we could beat Crawford's best performance by a mile. The morning Blackstone announced they were switching to Pinnacle, my phone started ringing. Preston's name on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. He called 4 more times before finally leaving a message. Andrew, this is Preston. We need to talk right now about some consulting work. Crawford's prepared to make you a very generous offer. Call me back immediately. I saved the message but didn't call him back. 3 days later, Preston was waiting by my car in the Pinnacle parking garage. "This is way out of line," I said, keeping my distance. "You've put 280 jobs at risk," he said, his voice all low and desperate. "Crawford's in crisis because of what you stole." "I didn't steal anything that belonged to Crawford," I said calmly. "I took my personal intellectual property that Crawford used without buying it. Your legal team screwed up, and you never valued my work enough to care about the details." Preston stepped closer, and I could see the desperation in his eyes. "Name your price. Whatever Pinnacle's paying, we'll double it." I thought about those 15 years sitting in my corner cubicle while he took credit for my work. About him laughing when I asked for a decent raise after saving the company millions. "You told me everyone's replaceable," I said quietly. "Even me, I'm just taking your business advice." The next quarter, Crawford's stock tanked 47%. They laid off 180 people. All the trade magazines were writing about their catastrophic loss of technical capability and how their award-winning logistics systems just mysteriously fell apart. Preston got forced out by the board. I watched the announcement from my office while I was finalizing deals with 3 major clients who were jumping ship from Crawford to Pinnacle. Then Crawford tried to sue me for stealing their intellectual property. Their case fell apart when my documentation proved I'd developed everything as personal projects. The judge tossed the whole thing, saying Crawford had failed to properly acquire the innovations they'd been using. The morning after the case got dismissed, I had an unexpected visitor. Preston was standing in my office doorway, looking nothing like the confident CEO who'd laughed at me months earlier. The guy looked like he'd aged 10 years. "You destroyed everything," he said. "No," I shot back. "You did that when you decided people were disposable. Those folks who lost their jobs, they weren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. They've got families, mortgages, kids in college." I felt the weight of what he was saying. The whole situation was messier than I'd wanted it to be. I know that. That's why Pinnacle's hired 68 former Crawford employees in the last 4 months. The people who got hurt by this didn't deserve it just because they worked for you. Preston just stared at me like he was trying to figure out if I'd planned the whole thing from the start. "You set this all up?" "Nope," I said, meeting his eyes. "I just got tired of being treated like garbage. You could have avoided this whole mess with a 10% raise and treating me like a human being." He left without saying another word. 8 months into my new job at Pinnacle, the fallout was still spreading. Crawford's stock never bounced back. Business schools were writing case studies about how they screwed up their talent management. Meanwhile, Pinnacle had grabbed 31% of Crawford's market share. One afternoon, Martin Rodriguez showed up at my office. He'd been Crawford's head of customer relations for 18 years, even longer than I'd been there. We used to grab lunch sometimes, complain about Preston's leadership. Now he was clutching his briefcase like his life depended on it. "Andrew," he said, his voice all strained, "thought maybe we could talk." I offered him coffee, water. He turned both down. "Lost my job 2 weeks ago," he said straight out. "My whole department. 42 people. That hit me like a punch to the gut." "Martin, I'm sorry. Are you?" He looked me right in the eye. "Everyone's saying you're the reason Crawford fell apart." I explained about my documentation, how the legal case went. He listened but didn't change expression. "I'm 59 years old, Andrew. Who's going to hire me now?" "Pinnacle will," I said, leaning forward. "We need somebody with your experience running customer relations. I can talk to Lindsay today." He shook his head. "Didn't come here for a job. Then why'd you come?" Martin looked around my office. The view, the nice furniture, the nameplate on my door. I wanted to see if it was worth it. If whatever you got was worth what happened to the rest of us. That question hit me harder than anything Preston had said. Was it worth it? All the recognition, the money, the satisfaction of proving I was right. Was that worth good people losing their jobs because they happened to work for the wrong company? "It wasn't supposed to go down like this," I said finally. "I just wanted what I'd earned." "We all want that," Martin said, standing up. "Some of us just can't bring down a whole company when we don't get it." After he left, I sat there for a long time just thinking. My phone buzzed with a text from Lindsay about our third quarter numbers beating projections by 22%. "Team dinner tonight to celebrate," she said. I didn't answer. Instead, I opened up a spreadsheet and started listing every Crawford employee I knew who'd lost their job. Next to each name, I looked up their background, their experience, what they were good at. By midnight, I had 237 people on that list. The next morning, I walked into Lindsay's office without knocking. "We need to talk about Crawford's former employees." "What about them?" she said, looking up from her computer. I put my spreadsheet on her desk. "These people lost their jobs because Crawford collapsed. Pinnacle made a fortune off what happened. We owe them something." She looked at the list. "We've already hired quite a few of them." "Not enough," I said, sitting down. "I want to set up a formal program to recruit Crawford's people. And for the ones we can't hire, I want us to fund job placement services and retraining programs." Lindsay leaned back in her chair, studying me. "That's going to cost us a lot of money for people who don't work here." "It's an investment in our reputation," I said, "and it's the right thing to do." She thought about it for a minute, then nodded. "Put together a proposal. I'll take it to the board." 4 weeks later, we launched Operation Fresh Start. Pinnacle committed to interviewing every qualified former Crawford employee. We partnered with 3 training companies to help people transition to new careers. For folks close to retirement, we created part-time consulting gigs. The whole industry noticed. Business magazines wrote articles about our approach to competitive displacement. Applications for our open positions shot up 350%. Clients started mentioning our corporate responsibility when they were negotiating contracts. Martin called me the day after we announced the program. "This you're doing?" "Yeah," I admitted. "You want to reconsider working for Pinnacle?" There was a pause. "Maybe as a consultant. I'm too set in my ways to completely start over." "We need your expertise," I told him. "Name your terms." 3 days later, he was setting up an office down the hall from mine. A year after I left Crawford, I got an email from Blackstone's procurement director. "The implementation exceeded our expectations," it said. "Efficiency improvements are 38% better than our previous provider." The boards approved expanding our contract with Pinnacle. I forwarded it to Lindsay with a note. "This is just the beginning. My name's on the system patents now. My picture's hanging in the lobby with the other Pinnacle executives. My team's grown to 18 people, including a bunch of former Crawford employees who finally get the recognition and pay they deserve." Sometimes I think about the people who lost their jobs at Crawford and couldn't find new ones. The collateral damage from Preston's arrogance. That's something I carry with me, knowing that getting justice for myself meant hardship for others who were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. But I also think about that moment in Preston's office when he laughed at me asking for basic fairness after 15 years of loyalty. How many other people had he treated the same way? How many careers had he crushed with his whole people are replaceable parts attitude? 6 months after Operation Fresh Start launched, I got a call I wasn't expecting. It was from Howard Walsh, Crawford's old legal counsel. "Coffee?" he said. "There's something you should know. We met at this little diner halfway between our offices." Howard looked rough, new gray hair, lines around his eyes that weren't there before. "They let me go last month," he said, stirring his coffee. "Part of the latest round of cuts." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and I meant it. "Pinnacle's hiring legal people if you're interested." He shook his head. "That's not why I wanted to talk. It's about your algorithms, your documentation." I tensed up. The court already settled that. "I know, and they ruled right," Howard said. "But there's something you don't know. After you first mentioned your personal projects in the exit interview, I went straight to Preston. Told him we needed to look into your claims before doing anything stupid. I showed him emails from 3 years back. You'd actually sent Preston detailed explanations of your algorithms, asking if the company wanted to formally buy them from you. You even suggested fair compensation." My coffee cup stopped halfway to my mouth. "I don't remember that." "You copied me on them. I found them in our archives when I was prepping for the lawsuit." Preston had replied dismissing the whole thing. Said something like, "Just implement it if it works. We'll sort out the details later." "He knew," I said. Howard nodded. "He knew exactly what you'd created, that you'd documented it as personal work, and that the company never properly acquired it. When you left and Pinnacle started using your systems, he came to me demanding we sue you, even though he knew we had no case." Howard sipped his coffee. "I told him we couldn't win, showed him his own emails. He ordered me to proceed anyway." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I want you to know something important. What happened to Crawford wasn't just about you taking your intellectual property elsewhere. It was about years of arrogance. Preston didn't just undervalue you, he did it to everyone, Legal, operations, customer service. He treated the whole company like disposable parts. And now those parts are working somewhere else, I said quietly. Exactly. Your algorithms were brilliant, but Crawford wouldn't have collapsed if Preston had built a company that could survive losing one person. He didn't just lose you, he lost the loyalty and knowledge of hundreds of people who felt exactly like you did. I thought about that on my drive back to Pinnacle. My revenge hadn't destroyed Crawford. It had just exposed what was already broken. That evening, I got another call from Preston. I almost ignored it out of habit, then decided to answer. Andrew, his voice sounded rough. I'm calling to apologize. Of all the things I'd expected, that wasn't one of them. I knew about your personal projects, he continued. I knew you documented them properly. He paused. I thought you were too loyal to ever leave, so it didn't matter. You misjudged me. I misjudged everything. The board fired me completely yesterday. Crawford's filing for bankruptcy next week. I hadn't expected it to go that far. I'm sorry about the employees, I said. That's why I'm calling. There's a final board meeting tomorrow. They're deciding severance packages. I want to recommend your Pinnacle program for our remaining people. You want to send Crawford's employees to Pinnacle? I want them to have jobs, Preston said simply. Pride doesn't matter anymore. 1 year after I'd walked out of Preston's office with my portfolio, I was standing at a podium accepting the Industry Innovation Award. Cameras flashed as I looked out at the audience, lots of familiar faces from Crawford, now wearing Pinnacle badges. Innovation isn't just about algorithms or systems, I said into the microphone. It's about recognizing value in people, treating them as irreplaceable instead of disposable. Companies that get this will always beat the ones that don't. After the ceremony, this young woman came up to me, fresh out of college, nervous but determined. Mr. Sullivan, I'm Jessica. I just started in systems development at Pinnacle. Welcome to the team, I said. She clutched her portfolio, reminded me of myself in Preston's office that day. I wanted to ask, how did you know when to stand up for yourself? I'm just starting out and I don't want to make mistakes. I thought about her question carefully. I waited 15 years too long. Don't do that. But what if they think I'm being difficult or ungrateful? I smiled. Those are just words people use when they want to pay you less than you're worth. As Jessica walked away, I noticed Preston standing near the exit. Our eyes met across the room. He nodded once, maybe acknowledgement, maybe respect. I nodded back. He'd lost everything but gained understanding. I'd gained everything I wanted professionally, but carried the weight of how it happened. We were both different because of that moment when he laughed at my request for a 10% raise. 2 years later, I launched a mentorship program for people in tech. Our first workshop was about salary negotiation and protecting your intellectual property. 300 people showed up. Martin helped me organize it. Jessica, now running her own team, was one of our speakers. Looking back, I understand that real revenge wasn't watching Crawford collapse or seeing Preston lose his job. It wasn't even my corner office or industry recognition. Real revenge was figuring out my own worth and refusing to let anyone discount it again. It was building a workplace where people like me, people like who I used to be, would never have to wait 15 years for basic respect. The algorithms I created were complex, but the lesson was simple. Nobody gets to decide what you're worth except you. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is just refuse to be treated like you don't matter.